And certainly on a case-by-case basis, you could argue, hey, what's 50 feet of riprap going to do to 670 miles of river? Well, that wouldn't be a big deal if there was only 1 or 2 permitted applications a year. But after those floods, there was just a deluge of applications.
There's roughly 8 to 10 times more river bank stabilization projects done in the time since those floods than in the last 80 years.
The Upper Yellowstone River Task Force was appointed by Governor Mark Roscoe in November of 1997. And it's a broad base from environmental people, business people, agriculture, people living on the riverbank. When you bring people together and they start talking about problems, they find a lot of common ground, and then, we're moving forward. I think the great strength is we said right from the get-go we were going to let science lead us into what we're calling recommendations. And then we have to take all of that research, put it together, and then try to do some modeling with the river. At least we'll be able to make an informed decision vis-a-vis where there's no data.
Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks has collected data on fish populations to better understand the effect of channel modification on fish habitat. Electrofishing uses a concentrated electrical current which causes fish muscles to involuntarily contract, drawing them towards the boat.
It's a very powerful technique, one that fisheries biologists rely on in order to look at animals that we can't easily see. But as anyone knows, growing up, water and electricity are not a good mix, and it's very important that we emphasize the danger. It takes very specialized equipment, a lot of training, and a lot of attention to detail while you're doing it to avoid injury. It's not something that someone would try at home.
They've just come through that electrical current, they just had their muscles worked out, but they're still kicking, and they'll recover pretty quickly from this. When we actually go to handle them for measurements, lengths and weights, we'll give them an anesthetic. We actually use clove oil. Kind of calms them down.
The fish is really quite flaccid and anesthetized. It makes it a lot easier for us to take a weight. You have here an example of your mountain whitefish. This is a good example of a brown trout. This would be a good example of a rainbow trout. And here we have a good example of a Yellowstone cutthroat trout.
Put some gloves on him.
You can see the cuts on his branchiosticles there, the orange coloration.
Such research has resulted in a wealth of information, providing insight into the relationship between changes to the Yellowstone and fisheries health. Another study involved cottonwood groves present along the river. Coring samples provide researchers with ages of stands without causing harm to individual trees. Age, location, and distribution provide important information about these vital components to a healthy Yellowstone.
Cottonwood stands have the highest diversity of wildlife that you'll find in a lot of areas, especially on the Yellowstone, where you have the plains where it's open grassland, there isn't a whole lot of trees, and then you've got this oasis of trees. And it will be shelter for a lot of birds, whether they are breeding and nesting here, they'll use this area, or they may be nesting somewhere else and use it as a feeding area, stopover areas. Deer come to the Meanderlopes to fawn their young and keep them here for their first 20 days, 30 days. It's also a good habitat for beaver. They actually eat the Cambrian layer of the willow and the cottonwoods for food. Because cottonwood trees are along the river edge, they actually shade the river and help keep the temperature down, which most fish can't survive if the temperature of the water goes up too quickly, and so it helps regulate the water in the summertime, and as well as producing a lot of the food that the fish eat. There is systems where they've lost their cottonwood trees because of dams and the way they regulate the flow releases, and where you've lost the cottonwood trees, you've lost the fisheries as well, because there isn't the food and the temperature spikes too quickly. In order to know how the bank stabilization projects are going to affect it, you have to understand the process that's occurring on this river system. In the higher stage, the river has more power to scour, and it will scour cut banks. As the river goes slower, it loses its speed, and so as soon as the velocity decreases, it will deposit some of its sediment load. But then as it gets around the corner, it will increase again and start scouring and picking up deposits. And so it will naturally sort of form a sinuous channel. Cottonwood trees only germinate on bare open ground. And so you're assuming if a tree is that age and it's 50 meters from where the river is now, the river was actually 50 meters back at that time. And that tree established maybe, 5 or 10 meters from the river's edge. By stopping the river from moving with a rock rip-wrapped side, you'll stop a lot of the sediment going into the stream, and so you'll reduce sediment that can be deposited later on. And because these new deposits are needed for cottonwood seedling establishment, you could reduce the amount of seedling establishment that would occur. Now, that doesn't sound that dramatic, but cottonwood trees normally have about a 100-year lifespan, although there are some that are 200 to 300 years old, but they're anomalies. And so maybe in our lifetime we don't think of it as quickly losing it, but if you have no young trees coming in to replace the old trees dying off, eventually you'll lose your cottonwood groves and it will change the makeup.
By allowing people to build in the floodplain, we basically sanction their ability to protect that property. When someone builds a wall in front of their property to protect their property from erosion by the Yellowstone, they create a domino effect in which property owners downstream or upstream can be affected by that changing the course of the river.
It's a balancing game. We're supposed to weigh the impacts both to the aquatic resource and to the project proponent and to society in general. With the influx of homeowners, some fairly wealthy people building some big houses along the river and paying a lot of money for this river frontage, the fact that they have money and they paid a lot for the land, they probably have a lower tolerance for erosion than some of the, maybe a former landowner who maybe wasn't as concerned or didn't have the means to do something. So as far as demographics go, I think some of the new types of landowners we're seeing along the river are driving the push to stabilize some of these banks.
It wasn't so long ago that the Corps of Engineers decided that they would build levees along the Snake River in Jackson Hole, and the reason they were going to do that is to allow trophy homes to be built in the floodplain. Today, they're spending tens of millions of dollars in an attempt to take down some of those levees and restore part of that river, but even the Corps has said at best they're going to restore a small portion of that part of the Snake River, and I think what it shows overall is once you allow enough homes to be built in a floodplain, you're probably never going to reclaim it. There's just too much locked up in real estate there. It's worth too much money to move somewhere else. And people on the Yellowstone are fond of saying, we never made that mistake here. We never built these huge dams like Grand Coulee or Hoover on the Yellowstone, so we still have this amazing resource. But the fact is, rock by rock and barb by barb and jetty by jetty, we're building Grand Coulees along the Yellowstone River. They don't go perpendicular to the current. They parallel the current. They're along the banks. And sooner or later, those walls of riprap are going to have the very same effects that a dam like Grand Coulee would have on a major river system. We're going to start to lose our fish. We're going to start to lose our wildlife. We're going to start to lose our riparian areas. So we need to view these stream bank improvement projects for what they are. They're small dams. They just point in a different direction than the traditional dam we look at. This task force wasn't convened because everything was going hunky-dory and there wasn't a problem. The task force was convened by Governor Roscoe because we did have a problem with overdevelopment on this river. So things are going to have to change to fix that problem.
In August of 2003, 7 years after its creation, the task force reported its findings. Despite its diverse membership, it was still able to reach consensus on 43 recommendations, exceeding many expectations. Among these were calls for research into better, less intrusive methods of bank stabilization. Another suggests that new bridges and reconstruction projects be designed to reduce problems with sediment and gravel deposits upstream and downstream. However, not everyone was pleased, and many felt that the task force needed to go further. Some believed that a new ordinance should have been suggested, prohibiting new building in the floodplain. Another call was for a change from the county's current 150-foot setback requirement to a 300-foot, as are found along the Madison and Bighorn rivers. Undoubtedly, consequences stemming from channel modification are sure to remain an issue far into the future. Human concerns come and go. All the while, beautiful Emigrant Peak stands vigil. So too does the Absaroka mountain range, as it has for millions of years, and will for millions more. Everywhere lie examples of spring's slow surrender to summer. This is, of course, welcome news for thousands of fishing enthusiasts, as well as area guides. Millions of dollars is generated each year by the guiding industry on the upper Yellowstone alone. Many hope to time their visits here to the annual caddisfly hatch, which occurs around Mother's Day. Millions upon millions of these flying insects will hatch seemingly all at once. They are an important source of food for river trout, which in turn are a source of enjoyment to people, if they can tolerate the endless swarms. Later in the summer, another famous hatch occurs. Known locally as salmon flies, they are technically stone flies. Unlike the ubiquitous caddis, the salmon flies emerge in waves, ascending the length of the river. These insects can grow to over 3 inches long and often end up as unwelcome decorations on car windshields. As fish swoop in to catch salmon flies, ospreys swoop in to catch them. The osprey's diet is comprised solely of fish. There's little doubt that these great birds have inspired countless humans along the river. The river continues unto the end of the valley at the site of the proposed Allen Spur Dam. Were it to have been approved, the barrier would have flooded 31 miles behind it. For 2 decades, this project was pursued before finally being defeated. At Livingston, the Yellowstone turns the Big Bend and heads eastward. It will soon warm and begin its transformation from mountain to prairie river. On its way, it will meander through the towns of Springdale and Big Timber, past the busy prairie dog towns of Gray Cliff, before the majestic sandstone cliffs between Columbus and Laurel. Turkey vultures peered down from atop a snag high above the river. Beavers, once pushed to the brink of extinction, have reclaimed their banks. The bark and its underside, cambium, are a big source of food. Contrary to popular belief, the wood of a tree has no nutritional value for the beaver. The river flows on past the Clark's Fork of the Yellowstone towards the Rimrock Cliffs of Billings, Montana's biggest city. It's here on the plains where the river sees the most use, for better and worse.
This channel here normally, this time of year, would have people fishing along the banks. There would be kids swimming up here, jumping off the the bridge, which they were doing earlier this spring.